welcome to a different episode of Killer Hangover this week. I need to be honest with you guys. This 3 kids thing is no joke. The baby is going through that oh-so-lovely 5-month sleep regression, and I got way behind on editing this week. We were doing so well with sleep, but it is what it is, and I'm really sorry. But we don't want to leave you guys hanging. So this week we wanted to give you a glimpse into what our lovely patrons get on Patreon. While on maternity leave last summer, our little baby break before the baby that never sleeps was born, Mom interviewed a retired detective, Ryan Runyon. Amazing stories, fun stories, and talking about stories, Mr. Runyon is also an author of 3 books. His most recent one, Tooth Key Killer, had me hooked from the very beginning. Very killer hangover-esque with a ghost and solving a crime with twists and turns. I'm just about finished and it's really good. But like I said, for this week's Killer Hangover episode, we're going to share with you Mom's interview with Ryan. He's got some great undercover stories, buying LSD, and his wife even pops on, giving her side of things, being married to a detective and all. And keep in mind, if you like what you hear, join us on Patreon. You can find the link in the description of this episode. Okay, you've heard enough from me. Here's Mom's interview with Ryan Runyon. Cheers!
Hello! Welcome to Killer Hangover for our patrons. There's a dog in the background because I am right now interviewing Ryan Runyon, who has a fabulous background, but he is a retired detective, and that is why I wanted to interview him for you guys. And he also has some awesome stories to tell too. Ryan is also an author. I have read 2 of his books, Fire High and Wheatland. You can get those on Amazon. He also has one in the making, and this one's given me a little heebie-jeebie when I read it, but that one is not out yet. It will be for you guys, and the title of it is The Tooth Key Serial Killer. And I'll tell you what, just a little insight, anything that has to do with eyeballs or teeth just gives me the heebie-jeebies. So,
but I'm not graphic in it, and I did kind of shorten the title. Now it's just called The Tooth Key Killer.
Okay, yeah, still anything has to do with pulling teeth, just not my thing. As I said, Ryan is a retired detective, but he has quite a history. It kind of started as far as the police side of it. He was actually a patrol safety officer in 3rd grade. Is that not correct?
Yeah, we used to have like a little sash with a little badge on it, safety patrol officer. It was in Royal Oak, Michigan. So I used to stop the kids and let them know when to cross when it was safe. So.
You were so cool.
I wish I had a picture of it. There's like a little belt here. And I can always be late for homeroom because, I'm the safety patrol officer. I got to turn my belt and my badge into the principal. So.
Yeah, I'm sure most of us knew one of those nerds when we were in school.
It wasn't a nerd.
You entered the Army at age 17.
Correct.
Made your mother sign the papers, from what I understand?
Yeah, so we'll say I had kind of a turbulent home life. So my parents were divorced, and then things weren't so great in school or at home. So I joined the Army, and my mom wasn't going to sign the paperwork because I was 17. I said, well, Mom, if you don't sign, I'll just run away. You'll never see me again. So she signs it.
Of course she did. Oh, and you joined the 82nd Airborne. Now, I think this is kind of funny because Ryan is afraid of heights.
But I didn't know that. But so I went to jump school.
And from what you said, you closed your eyes until the chute opened.
Well, the first jump, obviously you're excited because I've never jumped before. So the first time I had my eyes open. But then when I'm out there and looking down, I was like, holy crap, what am I doing up here?
I can't imagine. One thing I have never wanted to do. No.
So I always tell my kids I had night jumps with my eyes closed going out the door. Now once the chute opened up, I felt okay. I just waited until I saw the tree line, then I would look down and do my PLF.
So you got out of the military at that point after 3 years, and you went back and finished high school at 20 years old.
Correct.
And then you went on to work in the oil fields of Oklahoma.
Yeah, the city's like Elkwood or Elk something. So, I mean, it was actually pretty good money back then, but it was kind of dangerous. And I noticed a lot of the guys had like some fingers missing. So it's like, it's not the job for me, even though the pay was good. So then I found a recruiter and I said, put me back in the Army.
So how long were you there in the oil fields?
Oh, just a few months.
Just a few
Maybe
months.
about 4 or 5 months.
And I'm looking at you. You have
Still
all
got
your
my fingers.
so that's good. Okay. So you joined the Army again, and after 4 years, you got out and applied to the RCPD, which is the Riley County Police Department, and also 2 other departments.
Yeah, it was El Paso Police because I was stationed at Fort Bliss, and I also applied for Los Alamos, New Mexico. So I took the test first with RCPD, and then when it all came back, I was like the number 4 guy. They only hired 3. And then actually I was offered the job at El Paso, but at that time it was kind of a violent city and the pay wasn't all that good. Luckily, Los Alamos called me up, and then when I interviewed and then spoke to the chief on that one, I took that job.
Okay, and this is the one I kind of want you to talk to me about just a little bit. You were undercover.
Yeah, so let's just say that I had a familiarity with narcotics as a kid growing up. So they want me to work undercover, mostly in Santa Fe, Espanola, and Los Alamos as well. So it's kind of like a tri-area drug task force.
Okay, and you said deep undercover. Now, what's the difference?
Well, they set me up with an ID card, so I had an alias. I had an apartment in Los Alamos that I really never lived in, and they also gave me a car to use to drive to do my drug buys. Now, being deep undercover, I also had some handlers. I had a detective sergeant from Santa Fe and one from Los Alamos as well, so they would always either have me wired up when I made my buys. And then we had like an intel guy in Santa Fe. So for like Santa Fe, he would gather up all the intel and then provide the information to my detective sergeant, and then we'd go ahead and make the buys.
So just being undercover, is that like a one-time thing, and deep undercover is more of a lifestyle thing, or what's the difference?
Well, the difference is it's like having a dual life. I mean, I couldn't even associate with any of the police officers in either Los Alamos or Santa Fe at that time. So even when I got paid and actually would have my evidence, I'd have to meet, like I had a tennis court that I'd meet my detective sergeants with, and then I'd pass over the evidence from the buys and then my reports, and then they would hand me my paycheck as well.
Wow. Okay.
So I couldn't associate with anybody, which I kind of felt bad for Sharon because she couldn't associate with any of the police officers, and pretty much she was kind of like on her own.
That's right. You were married at this
Yeah.
time.
And we had, she was pregnant and we had a young daughter.
Oh my goodness. But could you talk to her?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'd come home to my normal apartment. I just never stayed at the other apartment. So I had to meet somebody and discuss narcotics, whatever. We'd go to my drug apartment, is what I call it. And then I had an alias name too. Now I kind of used part of my name, and I did that intentionally. So if somebody said, "Hey, John," I mean, I know that they're referring to my alias and then not my real name. So my alias name had part of my real name in it.
Okay.
I just won't say which it was. But.
Right. All
Well,
right.
I guess I'll just say the first name was Rick.
Rick. Okay. There you go. So you did that for how long?
About 9 months. And then there was a lot of court that went on afterwards, and then I had to go to the academy. In New Mexico at that time, you have up to a year before you go to the academy, or that you could have up to a year before they send you to the academy. So even though I still had to qualify with a weapon and then learn some of the basic laws, and I actually went to narcotics school with the New Mexico State Police, so they taught me how to smoke, how to like pretend like I'm sniffing cocaine. Yeah, they give me like a little spoon, and like when you take that cocaine, the spoon, right at the last second you flip it so when you snort it,
Really?
the cocaine's falling down and it's not going up my nostril.
Really?
So I actually had to learn some of their tricks.
And they taught you how to smoke?
Yeah, so you'd inhale and kind of hold it. You wouldn't take it into your lungs, and then of course kind of blow it out. So yeah, they taught me how to trick smoke.
Oh my goodness.
Because you got these drug dealers, I mean, they light up a joint, and obviously you got to smoke.
You've got to
with
smoke it with them.
Yeah, and cocaine
or
too. Like,
snort it with them.
or like if you got a guy that's like selling you some cocaine, and he says, "Taste it," and of course then I pull out my little spoon and
Pull out your handy dandy spoon.
and make sure I flip it. And I would take urinalysis test once a month, and I always was clean.
To make sure that you really weren't.
Yeah, that wasn't doing narcotics.
Okay.
Well, there was one case, so it was in Santa Fe, to where when he opened up the bindle with his knife, he thought I was a narc, and of course he puts the knife to my throat, and he says, "Taste it." And that's the one time where
you really had to.
I really did taste it.
Really
and actually,
have to.
my handler was supposed to be like monitoring my wire, and I gave the code word to where I'm hoping like the cavalry would come in. And at that time, he didn't show up. So when I'm leaving the back part of this guy's yard, which is has a high fence on it, I walk over to where his vehicle's parked at, and I'm like, I won't use his real name. I'm like, "Tom, where were you?" And actually, I'm kind of mumbling because my tongue is just numb.
Uh-huh.
I said, I had to taste cocaine, and he gets all upset, like, "You can't do that." And I said, "You put a knife to my throat. What do you want? What do you want me to do?" As I'm kind of mumbling, what it was is where he was parked at, there was a gal that he was talking to, so he was away from his car,
Oh, no.
chatting with her. Yeah. Now then we go to the grand jury, and I tell the story because we actually charged this person with aggravated assault on a police officer. And I know one of the questions that came up is, "Well, did you identify yourself as a police officer?" It's like,
no, because he would have been
I would
dead.
have been stabbed.
No kidding. So
that was the only time I actually tasted cocaine
well, you have
in
this
my life.
cool. You have this really cool little verbiage that I like, and it's called what you call God crumbs.
Correct.
And I think you had a few God crumbs, from what I understand, when you were working narcotics.
I believe so.
Can you just give us an idea of? I like the toilet one and the hole in the wall one.
Well, the toilet one is, we'll just say that there was I made a purchase of a certain item, and of course then we get a search warrant for the house. And as we're doing the search warrant, we're finding all this product all over the house, and my partner, and I'll just use Tom as a fake name for all of my partners. So Tom's talking to the suspect, and the suspect's not really saying much, if anything. Obviously we got product all over the place, but we couldn't find any money. So we're pretty much wrapping things up, and then Tom says, "Hey, Run, you go tell the other guys that we're getting ready to leave." And so the garage is kind of like a door from the house to the garage, so there's no like separation between the garage and the house. It's just a door. So as I walk into the garage, I look to the right and I see this toilet in the corner, and I'm like,
"There's a toilet
wow.
in the garage."
The toilet in the garage. And then so those guys were like, "Hey, Runyon, we've already searched all that. It's okay." But I'm curious anyway, so I actually lift up the lid and I find the money box. And so, still being kind of a rookie police officer, I'm all excited. I'm like, "Oh my God, I found the treasure!" So I go run into the house saying, "Tom, look what I found! I found the money box."
And now you're.
So my instincts, I mean, for whatever reason, I guess I can call that God crumbs, because it's like going to the house and I just see that toilet and I just had to open up the lid.
That's a little voice.
Something just made me open up that lid.
And something made you just lean against a wall?
Yeah, so this would have been like a different case to where, again, I buy some product, and then, of course, we get a search warrant, and we're searching the residence. So actually kind of a wall and something else. So we're not really finding much of anything. I think we found like scales, and that's about it. And then so there's a speaker in this one room, and the like the base or that cover of the speaker was like blown out. And for whatever reason, I'll call it a God crumb. I just put my hand down there and I pulled out this big old bag of
voila.
cocaine. It's like, oh, there you go. And then so now, obviously, the subject that's being arrested, he's on the couch and he realizes that we found some cocaine. And then there's like this tapestry up on this wall. So as I go ahead and lean up against the wall, I kind of fall through the tapestry, and there was like a hole in that wall to where other stuff was in the other side of the apartment. So it's almost like having two apartments, and one is being used for narcotic stuff, and the other apartment would have been like the living quarters.
If you think about it, had you been just a few inches one way or the other, you would not have seen the hole. You would not have felt the hole.
It was a big rug.
I mean, you just leaned against that exact spot where you needed to.
It's almost like
crazy.
Also bought some LSD. So there was this kid that apparently got in trouble with the law, and he agreed to cooperate and had this LSD dealer. And of course, this guy was selling a lot of LSD. And so I was going to buy 500 hits. Well, I didn't have any money on me. We were going to do what they call a buy bust. So I had the Santa Fe police, not to say Santa Fe police, outside this guy's apartment. So you had Santa Fe police up on the roof where the fire escape's at, and then you had Santa Fe police in the hallway. So all I had to do was give the signal, and they were going to come in. Well, so now this guy gives me like many sheets of LSD, and there's supposed to be like 500. And the reason why I wanted to buy 500, there was a concert in Albuquerque, and I was going to sell this LSD. This was my excuse. I was going to sell this LSD at this concert, which is why I was buying so much. So then he hands me all these sheets of LSD, and then I'm counting, like 1, 2, and he goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm going to make sure you got 500 hits." He goes, "You are a narc." And right about that time, Santa Fe trying to like bust into this door, and this guy had such a hard, thick door they couldn't break in.
Oh no.
And so this kid, I was worried about this kid because he was with me as well. So I felt that he might have been in danger because this, we'll say Tom, went to go grab like a fork. I guess he's looking for something. And so I thought he was going to either hurt me or hurt this kid. So I go running into the kitchen and unlock the doors to the Santa Fe police and come to make the bust. So now I'm holding on to, and actually we're fighting over this LSD too. So this guy that sells it to me, he's trying to take the acid from my hand, and of course we're like fighting back and forth. And that's when I break away and unlock the door. And so then my sergeant detective says, "Runyon, where's the LSD?" And I said, "Well, it's in my hand." And I'm holding like this, and he goes, "What? Drop that." And he goes, "Drop it." So I'm like dropping all those sheets of LSD. I'm like, "Why?" He goes, "Because this stuff gets absorbed in your skin." He goes, "Now go sit on that couch and we're going to watch
and don't move."
So I'm sitting on this couch. So while they're making the arrest and they're searching and they're taking care of this kid and getting him out of the way as well, every like 20 minutes, Tom would come up to me and say, "How you feeling?" "I feel normal." So
it never hit you.
So it never got.
As we stated a little earlier, Ryan was married through all this, and we have the fortunate time to be here with Sharon, his wife, who just walked in, who is also one of my friends. She lived through all this also. So I kind of wanted to ask her, Sharon, hello, first of all.
Hello.
Thank you for adding your little tidbit.
Oh, anything for you and Ryan to do.
I should ask her how old she was at that time. Yeah, you're like 19 or 20.
Well, I know it's not easy being a military wife. That I know from experience, as you know also. Mm-hmm. Now, a policeman's wife is also not easy. But let's go to the days of undercover. How is that?
Scary. Very lonely.
So, how often did you see Ryan during those times?
I saw him every day. It was me and Chas, as she was my social butterfly bug. Anyway, so she and Josh are 21 months apart, so I was pregnant with our oldest son, Joshua, at the time while he's going through all this. And so Chastity was probably 20 months, so she wasn't quite 2 yet.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. So anyway, but as oddly as this may sound to some moms, she was my sanity.
Really?
Yeah, because we would go walking together, obviously. Can't leave her home. But anyway, we'd go walking together, and we would go to the store, go shopping, and would go down into Santa Fe and drive around. And
it probably kept your mind off of the reality of what Ryan was going through also.
Yeah, and I could still talk to my family back here. So my mom and dad kind of knew a little bit what was going on because they were going to come and stay with me when I had Josh.
Uh-huh.
But you remember the one time that you and I were in the store together, and you remember what someone had said when they saw me?
No.
They said, "Rick." Now, do you remember what happened? They asked who you were, and I said, "Well, that's my sister." Because I wasn't married undercover. I mean, I was a single man, so we're in the store. Was it Los Alamos or Santa Fe?
Santa Fe. We didn't shop in Los Alamos. When we were together, we were never in Los Alamos. We were always in Santa Fe.
Yeah, so they see us shopping in the store, and they said, "Rick." And so that's when I turned around and, "Well, who's that?" I'm like, "Well, that's my sister."
Oh my gosh.
I forgot about that until just now.
And now that reminds me, do you remember when we went and ate in Espinosa? Do you remember that?
Oh my Lord, that's a rough city, but yes.
Do you remember? Because we couldn't go out as a couple, so
right.
We tried to go where he wasn't doing any business, so to speak. Anyways, we went and we ate there, and he was like nervous the entire time.
I'm
just
sure.
like looking over his shoulder.
Sure.
Well, I did make a buy off somebody in Espanola. So I was kind of worried about that. So it wasn't like a clean town for me.
I just can't imagine on both ends. You must have been just scared for him the whole time.
I don't know. It's kind of like everybody always asked me when he was even a police officer, did I ever worry? And I just never. You're scared because you know about other people, but knowing that I trusted him and I just felt he would be safe.
Yeah.
So I never had the fear that he would never come back to me.
Nicely put, Sharon.
Yeah, well, thank you.
And actually, I was so good at being undercover, so the guy that did my interview,
Oh,
I'll mention his first name is Brent, so he did my background check before I got hired, and so now I got like long hair and I'm looking like a doper.
I was wondering whether your appearance had to change.
He stopped me. My taillight was out in the car that they gave me, and I had some drugs in the back of the trunk. So
good
remember that story with
Lord.
Brent when he stopped me? And so he wanted to do a search of this vehicle, and he didn't know who I was. I mean, he saw my ID card of Rick and whatever the name was, so I had a good ID card. You could run it and it still showed that I was valid.
Uh-huh.
But he would not, I wasn't going to give him consent to search because, like, oh my God, he's going to find stuff. And then we're really going to sit there and be like, my ID will be, or my undercovers will be known.
Mm-hmm.
And so afterwards, I called up my handler that she had mentioned. We'll just say his first name was Tom.
Uh-huh.
I said, Tom, Brent stopped me and just let you know that they ran me. So we always had a chuckle about that. So that was the one time I got stopped by the police.
Did you tell them that Brent was the one who did
Don't mention his last name.
I'm not going to. But that he did your initial interview.
Yeah, he did my interview. He just didn't even recognize because I had some
He
hippie
didn't
hair.
even recognize
He
you.
didn't recognize me. In fact, afterwards, when I came out from undercover, I said, Brent, you remember that old Biscay? I drove a Biscay. I said, you remember that Biscay you stopped for a tail light out? He goes, yeah, that was me. And you're damn right you weren't going to search my trunk.
And then when he came out from undercover, Brent's wife and I became the best of friends.
And we're still friends.
And we were at a baby shower, and she looked at me. She said, "This whole time." I said, "Yes, this whole time." And she said, "I would have come, and we could have been friends." I said, "But
you couldn't."
That couldn't happen."
Sharon, well, thank you for that
Sure.
side of the whole thing. 'cause-
Well, at least tell her about how I actually came out with the domestic case that happened at the apartment complex. I guess then I'll have Sharon tell her part of the story. So I'm getting ready to come out. And so they put alarms in my apartment. So I have like an alarm on my doormat to where if you step on it, it sends a radio transmission to the Los Alamos police.
You had that in our apartment?
Yeah, it's in
See,
my-
that's how oblivious I was.
Tom set it up. Anyway, so if you would step on it, it sends a transmission to the PD saying, hey, Officer Runyon needs help, blah, blah, blah. So I'm sleeping on the couch. Sharon's back in the bedroom sleeping. And I'm in my hospital scrubs. And I could just hear
Did I
this-
have Josh yet?
No, you were still pregnant.
Why did you have hospital scrubs? Just a question.
My sister was a nurse, so I think scrubs are cool.
They are super comfortable.
Thank you.
I have a pair also.
We won't tell the story about my motorcycle and scrubs now, will
Okay,
we?
you're getting distracted.
All right, so anyway, so I hear this scream. I mean, it's a horrible crash and a scream. And I open up the door, and I can see this woman being dragged down these metal steps. And so I grab my badge and they gave me like a little .38 pistol that I used, and I just go running. I actually yelled to Sharon, said, call 911. I said, this gal's being thrown down the stairs. And so if you can imagine this guy holding his wife's hair, and he's pulling her down the steps.
Oh, God, how
I put
awful.
the gun to him, and I got my badge in my left hand. I said, drop her. And so he does let go of her hair, and she just like thud on the metal steps all the way downstairs. But there's a guy down below in the bottom apartment, and I said, sir, can you help her, please? And I go taking my gun, and I'm telling this guy upstairs, and then I had him sit in the corner of the landing, and I was just waiting for the police to arrive. So I just got the gun at him. He looks at me, he goes, I thought you were a narc. I said, no, I was an undercover cop. I mean, they actually thought I was a narc when I was living there. So finally, the police arrive, and they don't even know who I am. I mean, they see this guy with a gun and a badge and scrubs. And I'm like, hey, I'm Officer Runyon. I'm undercover with your department. He just threw his wife out the window and dragged her down the stairs. So now, here's
gosh.
Sharon's side of the story when she's the one making the calls and seeing all this. Go ahead.
You had me call 911. I was scared because you're going outside with a gun, for starters.
Well, you can see what's happening also,
I
though,
didn't
can't
even.
you?
No, because I didn't go outside because I'm pretty sure I had just had Josh because my parents had just left. Because when my parents were there, Ryan was still undercover, so we would go up into the Bandelier Mountains. I mean, you really feel like nomads. We're going up into the Bandelier Mountains where there are no people. Anyways, but that's what we would do so that nobody would see Ryan with us. So my parents had just left, so I just had Joshua. I had pretty big babies, so there was no mobility.
Not a lot
I
of
wasn't going
movement.
anywhere. So plus because he went outside with a gun, you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, having watched all kinds of movies, all these little shootouts are going through your head. It's like, oh my God. But just the idea that I did hear the glass break because he threw her through the window.
I just can't imagine seeing this happen.
Yeah.
I'm happy you didn't see it happen.
Yeah, and then I later, after all that had passed, had done, because we didn't have washers and dryers in our apartments, it was the laundry mat was right across from us for the complex. So I'd gone over there with Chastity, and Brian was with Josh, and she, the abused wife, was right there. And she wouldn't even look at me. She wouldn't even talk to me. I mean, she acted like she was very angry. So, and that really bothered me for a while.
Well, yeah.
Because I thought, I just wanted to shake her. What are you doing? Get the hell out. But
this is afterwards. After it happened, with her 100 and whatever stitches that she had to have.
It was really sad.
Very sad.
We moved soon afterwards.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, we definitely moved. And Los Alamos Police actually gave me moving money to help me move to a different place.
Jeez, that just scary for your family. So I'm going to move on to when you came to Manhattan.
Well, you know, Sharon's from Manhattan, and actually I just didn't feel safe in Los Alamos anymore. I mean, I definitely had a contract on me. I used to get calls at late at night saying, hey, Runyon, there's a guy driving a black sedan. Just let you know that he may be looking for you. And it got to the point where I told one of my sergeants, we'll just call him Tom, I said, Tom, don't call me about these things anymore. I just don't want to hear it. I'm done listening to these phone calls. I just want to be a patrol officer. So then I applied for Riley County Police, and that time I got hired. So second time's a charm.
There you go. Not third, but second for you.
Those could be more God crumbs, dear.
Well, there you go. Another God crumb. Getting hired the second time.
Isn't that the God crumb? Okay. Now you have a lot of stories. I have to tell our listeners right now, I've been sitting here for probably about 2 hours listening to stories before we even started. And then my great friend Sharon made us a margarita. So
that'll be your drink for
That's because we're exiting New Mexico.
We're exiting New Mexico and coming into Kansas. So we've got to
getting some wheat beer now.
We've got to guzzle our margaritas and go to wheat beer. Now, did you go straight into being a detective when you were here? Or?
No, actually, so I went to New Mexico Police Academy, so I was certified, so I get hired from Riley County, and I was on the swing shift. So I was on swings probably for about 4 years.
That's kind of hard, isn't it? I mean, as far as night, day.
Yeah, but you get used to it. I did have to do a year in Aggieville. I mean, at the time, Riley County demands that at least once in your career, you got to do at least a year in Aggieville. Aggieville's kind of fun.
Our listeners, many of them don't know what Aggieville is. Aggieville is the little section that is not attached to K-State, but it's where the students go to have fun.
And then I was known as the pipe narc in Aggieville. There was a frat house that they all made a bust on something, we'll say in New Mexico. So my brother was a fraternity member, so he gives me his sweatshirt and, of course, some other things. And then as I'm going to these bars, undercover with another patrolman who's now like the assistant director, without giving his name, we would do the bars together, and I'd be in my fraternity shirt, and then I'd look at the kids that are drinking, and you can see which ones are underage. When the cops would come in, when it's time for the cops to come in, you can see the ones that are underage hide their drink, and I'd say, that one there, and that one over there. And so then...
Now this is after the 18.
Yeah, so this is like you had to be 21 to drink.
Okay.
Which is funny how you said that, because I could drink at 18, and so could Sharon.
And so could I. Just saying.
So I guess I must have busted somebody with the fraternity that I had the shirt on, because I remember going to city court one time and somebody yelled out, "There's the fraternity narc." So,
frat narc.
Yeah.
You were on the swing shift for 4 years, you said?
No, it would have been like 3 years, because I did 1 year in Aggieville, so 4 years total before I went to investigations.
They went to investigations. Now, do you have to apply for that, or did they ask you to be on that? How does that work?
Well, there was a case that I worked on patrol that I guess I got pretty good confession on this case, and then they asked me if I wanted to work investigations, so I said yes.
All right, so is that a promotion then?
Not really.
In TV it is.
Well, now out Raleigh County they got corporal ranks, and I always wanted to be a corporal.
Okay.
Actually, when I did retire from Raleigh County, I even asked Detective or director, Brad Schoen, because he wanted me to stick around for another 5 years, because he was going to retire in 5 years. And like, I guess he liked me in investigations. And I said, Brad, make me a corporal and I'll stay. Obviously,
that didn't work.
Well, he said, well, there's no corporal positions yet. I said, well, then create one.
Then make one.
And then after I go to K-State Police, guess what? They get corporals. It's like, wow, happens after I leave.
Maybe it was a God crumb and you don't know it.
That's a reverse God crumb.
Maybe, you don't know.
You don't get to define God's crumbs.
That's right. So you have told me a few very, very interesting stories. One of them, if you don't mind, if we can discuss it, is the one where a young woman was found outside of Manhattan and her baby. She had no identification on her whatsoever. I don't know if she was found naked but you had kind of talked to me about this case, and I just found it very fascinating how you finally identified her.
And this is where I kind of think about, we get crumbs. I mean, either you see it and you act on it, or you miss it. And actually, it even goes back even further than her being buried. There was a case in Chicago to where a Korean store owner was killed. And one of the suspects was a soldier out of Fort Riley. He had just gotten back from Iraq, so it would have been like '04. And he visits his uncle in Chicago, and they go ahead and rob this Korean store. So anyway, the uncle and the soldier and his girlfriend come back to Manhattan, and they are hiding out at the Blue Valley Trailer Park. So we got information about them, and we're kind of watching the trailer park. We're waiting for a time to go ahead and make an arrest. And so we finally make an arrest on them. And so we've got the uncle and the nephew that are in our county jail, plus the girlfriend, because a lot of the clothing items that she stole from the store were inside the trailer. And so I remember they were bringing some Chicago detectives to do the interviews on the uncle and the nephew. And I believe it was Captain Grubbs at the time. And I think he said, Runyon, don't interview these guys. The Chicago cops are coming. But he never said anything about the girlfriend. So I actually bring the girl up. And I do the interview. And she does admit that she was there, and she saw the shooting and robbery go down. But in her words to me is, Runyon, I was shopping. And actually, if you watch the video, she's got one of those big carts, and she's just going down the aisles, and she's just putting
things in.
Just putting clothes
She
on.
was shopping.
Yeah, she
for
was
free.
shopping. And then so when we actually went inside her trailer to do the search, I mean, all those clothes that you see on the video were in her bedroom. She kind of helped as far as being there, and that the uncle and nephew were involved. It was to watch the video, it's just horrible. I mean, the uncle would shoot the guy several times.
Oh, jeez.
And he's like, so this Korean guy is like laying on the floor by the register, and they're actually standing on him, trying to get that register to get open.
Oh, good Lord.
And then he'd yell for his nephew, and he would jump over the counter, and then he would also be like shooting this guy several times till he finally died, because he was moaning there for a while. And of course, and the way that Chicago was amazing, the police department. So this Korean store owner had 2 video cameras. So he had a store worker who was also in on it. But he must not have trusted her, because he had another video camera to where he didn't tell his associate about that camera. So you can see these suspects are actually pulling out the VCR tape from the camera that she knew about,
but not
the
other
other one that was hidden, which actually shows the whole crime process. So anyway, then the 2 detectives from Chicago came up and did their interviews, and they got their confession. So now you got to fast forward in 2004 to where now you've got this unknown Hispanic female buried in a shallow grave outside of Ogden. Now, I had just gotten back from Iraq, and I guess you can kind of say this is a God crumb too. So Sharon's mom was living with us in the basement, and before I went to Iraq in '03, actually then '02, early '02 in Kuwait, her mother said, don't worry about it, Ryan. I'm not going to die until you get back. Well, so we got like a month left in Iraq before we get to go home, but I get this Red Cross message, and my colonel says, hey, Runyon, it's not like your mother-in-law is going to die. So they put me on a flight. So I get on a Sherpa, and they fly me to Ali Salim, and then they drive me over to the Kuwaiti airfield. And I'm looking like garbage. I mean, I've got my uniform that I had on out in the field and all that, and I hadn't even taken a shower, didn't shave. And this is where the USO is so great. I mean, so before I fly out of Kuwait, somebody at the USO says, hey, we heard about what happened here. We're going to clean you up. So I got to take a shower. They can clean clothes. And then, of course, I get on the plane. And then So when I arrived in Atlanta, and I didn't know that Bonnie had died. So I called Sharon.
You take your time. Take your time.
So I called Sharon and said, hey, I just arrived. And Sharon said, her mother had just died. But it's the way that it went down is, I guess you can call it a God crumb, I guess. So Bonnie had almost promised that she wouldn't die until I got home. So my oldest son pretended to be me and said, hey Bonnie, it's Ryan, I'm home. And then she died. So that happened when I was in Atlanta. So then I flew from Atlanta to Kansas City, and Sharon picked me up, and then so now I'm back in Kansas. So that would have been when did your mom die? The 13th of September?
Yeah. No, August.
August. So then, I haven't really processed out yet. So they gave me like 2 weeks of emergency leave to take care of family affairs with Sharon's mom. And then I go to Camp Atterbury to start processing out. And so when you process out, so my unit hadn't even come home yet. They're still over in Iraq.
Right.
I mean, I got to come home early. Thank God, Bonnie for letting me come home early for 9, I guess, for the reason. But so now I process out of Camp Atterbury, and so I know I had like 30 days leave left before I had to go back to work at Raleigh County. And that's when they found the body buried in the grave. I got a call.
Can I interrupt there?
Sure, go ahead.
How did they find the body?
Oh, so I guess you can say this is kind of a God crumb as well. So she's been in the shallow grave. I think they estimate she might have, because he was a National Guard, and he had drill weekend, and the dates I might be a little off, but it's like the 17th or 18th of September is where we believe that he went home for drill and then picked up his ex-girlfriend and then brought her to Ogden and then killed her and then buried her in a shallow grave along with his 1-year-old son. So she's in the shallow grave, and I think it was October is when they found her body. So there was a hunter. So if you go down K-18 at the time, and I forgot, or is it Road 54 or whatever it was, you go down that gravel road, and there's like this lone house there in the corner, and if you start heading west, it finally comes to a dirt road. I think the railroad uses that road to do maintenance on the track. She was buried across from the dirt road near where the track's at. And so the hunter's actually walking down the dirt road, and he happens to see this arm sticking out of the ground with the hand. So he calls the police, and of course Detective Reinecker goes out there to process the scene. Grubbs is out there, I believe, and then that's when I get the call if I wanted to come into work. I just pretty much was still on that military leave, and I said sure. And so when I arrive out at the scene, they haven't found the child yet. Reinecker still kind of working on excavating for evidence around the female. Obviously, she's blackened, decomposed. And I remember they cut off her hand, and I want to say it was like the right hand. It's been so long. And another detective, we put the hand into a bag.
But it wasn't it was the police that cut off her hand.
Yeah, it wasn't me. I think it was probably Reinecker that probably snipped away the tendons of the hand. And
I know that our listeners are going to say, and I know the reason, but can you explain why did they cut off the hand?
Well, we didn't have any ID. I mean, at the time, I think she was totally nude, and there was no wallet, no purse, nothing around. But I think when they were looking at the decomposed fingers, they could see what looks like fingerprints. So they thought they could hydrate the decomposed skin to get some fingerprints. So the hand was put into a bag, and Detective Sonia Gregoire drove the hand out to KBI so they could hydrate it and then ink it and then see if we can ID her. So I guess if you want to look into God crumbs, I mean, apparently a coyote, I believe, or some kind of a wild animal must have smelt the decaying inside the shallow grave and had dug up just enough to where, and I guess maybe the coyote or whatever was dragging on the fingers of the hand and brought the arm out, but realized that probably pretty nasty, so the wild animal or the coyote must have just left and didn't continue to gnaw on it.
Right.
Now, I kind of got the impression, if I recall, that had that hand or arm stayed out any much longer out in the elements, it probably would have just decomposed completely and we'd have lost the latent prints.
Fingerprints, yeah.
So, obviously, we were able to hydrate, and they got some fingerprints. And then they ID'd her, and there's another part of the God crumbs, because had she never been in trouble when she was 14, she would have been forever a Jane Doe. So the way I understood it, she was in we'll just say kind of an area of Chicago where there's some gang activity, and I think the police had responded to a situation out there, and I think she threw a bottle or something at one of the police officers, and she got arrested at 14. So they had her fingerprints. And that's how we got her identified.
Holy moly.
Now, getting back to the Chicago story with the Korean store owner. So
Yeah.
I already knew these two Chicago detectives. And so we had her identified, so we knew who she was. But now we wanted to know what else of her involvement. So I think I spoke to the Lopez or Bush, and I said, hey, can you do a background check on this gal to see what else can pull up? So when she was 16, she got pregnant from her boyfriend. And now in Chicago, 16, you can't consent. It's kind of like, in Kansas, if you're 15 and under, you can't consent to have sex. So, it would have been like a rape charge.
Right.
So there was an information report filed, but there were no actual charges to it. So apparently her aunt had filed a report with the Chicago police, and that's how we got the name of her boyfriend, who apparently was living in Ogden at the time.
So the baby was his baby then?
Correct. Later we did DNA, and it turned out to be his son.
So this gal was only, 18?
I think she was 17. So she was at a women's home in Chicago, and apparently he, when he was on his drill, he went ahead and picked her up and brought her back to Kansas.
Good grief. And he was actually he was tried and found guilty.
And then they had an appeal, and then we had to have a second trial, and he was found guilty the second time on lesser charges. I think it was still first degree on the child, and then manslaughter on his ex-girlfriend.
His girlfriend. And that was just recently, actually, wasn't it?
Yeah, a couple years ago, because I was working at K-State Police when I had to testify the second time.
So, okay, I'm just going to move on from there, because anytime any child, especially a child, gets killed, that just really bothers me. Big time, as I'm sure it does you also. Is there any other interesting case, I guess, that you would like to?
Then there was a case, and again, I'll just use Tom as the name. So another 17-year-old kid was down in Aggieville and got into a dispute with some soldiers, and I think there might have been like a little bit of pushing going on. And the 17-year-old had like a blue bandana, if I recall, and I think the older soldier went ahead and grabbed the bandana. And then so we'll say Tom had left Aggieville and then came back with a steak knife and was looking for the soldiers, and the soldier that he got the dispute with, he went ahead and took his little steak knife and stabbed him in the stomach. And I guess he must have hit a main artery down there, because apparently, he just died almost instantly and just bled out. So I get called in for that one, and as I'm investigating the case, I'm being told that, they see this kid running up towards, back when we had Hardee's back then. Mm-hmm. And I think somehow we were able to identify a vehicle and somebody else, and then talking to that person, and he was probably 15 or 16. He was also a young kid. He finally gives up the name of Tom, and then he finally gives up the name of Tom's last name, and then I'm actually very familiar who Tom
is.
And so my captain at the time said, well, Ryan, you still want to work this case because I'm very familiar with who this Tom guy is. And I said, well, sure. And then so we go ahead and go to this residence, and I make contact with his grandfather, and I said, hey, we need to talk to Tom about this case here. And there's a situation down in Aggieville, and we bring the granddad and the kid down, and this is like probably the one time that anyone has ever been so truthful and gave a complete confession as far as what happened. I mean, there was just no deviation, no trying to change the facts, and so he admits to what had happened. And then when we finally go to court, they hire a pretty good attorney. And obviously, before we even go to court, I guess here's the guy that comes. So now, we'll say days after when he's been arrested, Joyce, who was like the clerk at the time, hands me over this pile of pawn tickets, which in Riley County and detectives, we normally just like go through the pawn tickets to see if there's anything interesting. And I happen to see the soldier's name. And it's like, wow. And he just bought a gun like maybe just a week before. And there was no mention of anything about a gun on the soldier.
This is the soldier that had been killed.
Yeah, this would be the victim that was stabbed. And so I called his unit, and I said, hey, Tom apparently bought a gun like a week before. Is this gun in the vault with the unit by any chance? And they said, no, he doesn't have the gun in the unit vault. So then I think we contacted the CID, and I got to go out there with them, and we were able to check his room, and apparently there was no gun there in the room. But at the time when he got stabbed, there was 2 other soldiers. So I'm talking to the CID. I said, well, can we bring those 2 other soldiers in so we can re-interview them? And so when they bring these 2 soldiers in, we happen to have his a staff sergeant as well. So I've got these 2 young soldiers plus his staff sergeant, and then we're able to go down to the Manhattan Police Department. And so I think I talked to the staff sergeant, and actually I think I talked to him last, because he's like really trying to sit there and interrupt and then trying to shut this thing down. So when I talked to these 2 other younger soldiers, I let them know that, look guys, you're not in any kind of trouble. No one said you took any part as far as what happened, as far as the stabbing and all that. I just want to know, I heard the guy that got stabbed had a gun. And I forgot which one gave it up first, but he said, yeah, when he got stabbed, he reached behind the small of his back and pulled his gun out. And he was going to shoot the 17-year-old, but then he just collapsed. And so they finally admitted that they picked up the gun and took it, I think it was a Jeep, they took it to the Jeep and they hid it. And so then later, they give that gun to that staff sergeant and they hide it at his house.
The staff sergeant had the gun.
Yeah, I believe. I mean, it's been so long since I've read that report, but I'm
okay.
pretty sure that the staff sergeant had the gun. So then I talked to the kid, kind of gives the same story that, yeah, he pulls the gun out, but he didn't shoot because he collapsed. Now, keep in mind, when I spoke to the 17-year-old, he had no idea about the gun. Never saw it. Once he stabbed him, he turned around and just ran. There was just no mention of the gun. So now when I talk to the staff sergeant, he finally does agree that, yes, I'll go get the gun. It's at the house, and I'll bring it to you guys. So then we actually recovered the gun. So I think when it went to trial, that was like a very important fact where the jury acquitted the 17-year-old of the murder charge.
He was acquitted.
He was acquitted. He was found not guilty.
Okay.
Now, because I've known this person since he was a young child. I mean, he used to play basketball with my kids. So it never really bothered me all that much. And so years later, I mean, when I come back from Iraq, I happened to see his mom walking down the street with a little girl or little child. And I said, hey, is that your baby? And she's like, no, that's Tom's daughter. I think it was a girl. It's like, oh, wow, so he's got a daughter. And then even when we moved from our old house to our new house, I saw him out in the street, and we actually chatted and talked. Has a great job, great family, and, we shook hands and hugged, and, I mean, the guy really turned his life around. That's one of the good things.
Wow, can we end on that positive note?
Okay.
Let's do that.
All right.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for doing this interview. I know that our listeners are going to find this very intriguing. And I also want to thank you for your time, not only in the military, but also in all the police fields that you've covered. Thank you for that.
Well, you got to thank Sharon. She won't put up with me, so.
Well, I wanted to thank Sharon, but she's left the room.
She's locked down.
So I know it's very hard to be married to somebody like that also. Thank you, Ryan, for everything. I think this will turn out just great.
All right.
Cheers.
Okay, cheers.